The first thing that I always want to know is, where's everybody from? I almost recognize you. Where are you from?
Cameron Rock.
I just want to give you a big bro hug, Cameron Rock, all the way from Meridian, Idaho. So the next thing I was going to ask is, how many people are here from Idaho? We got a couple Idahoans here. Anybody know where Preston, Idaho is? What is Preston, Idaho famous for? Thank you, Napoleon Dynamite. Anybody not seen Napoleon Dynamite? If so, you have to leave and dismiss yourself right now. I have to share a couple of insights in regard to Napoleon Dynamite. Did you know that that movie is not fictional? In fact, that was a documentary of my senior year of high school. Don't believe me? When I was a sophomore at Preston High, a kid moved into the school by the name of Jared Hess, and he was kind of a nerd, right? Like, he's a little bit of a different kid altogether. He wore moon boots, he loved nunchucks, his best friend's name was Sam Espinosa, and we made fun of him all the time, right? So at the end of our junior year, Jared decided he was going to run for student body president. And he was going to run against a girl by the name of Adrienne Stewart, who was a very popular gal, cheerleader type of gal. And the way that we select our student body president is that they have to do a skit. So they give a little speech and then they do a skit. And if they do a great skit, we're gonna vote them in, right? So Adrienne goes first. She does a nice job, dancing type of thing. Then you have Jared that goes next, and with his friend Sam Espinosa and all his other friends, they did this unbelievable choreographed dance-off, breaking stuff on stage to that song Mortal Kombat. I'm in the audience, right, watching this. And when he gets done, lights go up, and we give him full-on standing ovation, and we vote him in as our student body president. And so any of you that have seen Napoleon Dynamite now know that that was a documentary of Brady Murray's senior year of high school. It was incredible, right? So I want to show you up here, I'm a big social media fan. I love to connect. I believe that the person you become is determined by the books you read and the people that you surround yourself with. I have the ability to be able to reach out and connect. You have the ability to reach out and connect through social media. I encourage you to do so. In fact, I'll even put a little incentive out there. Anybody like to golf? I have a dozen Pro V1s right here for anybody, and so we'll do a drawing actually. Anybody that connects with me, takes a picture, tags me in Instagram, tweets me. I'm trying to learn the vernacular. Shelly's just laughing at me. Shelly's my marketing director, or connects with me in LinkedIn. I'll do a drawing for a dozen Pro V1s, and let's see what I got in here. I've got a leather portfolio, Mass Mutual leather portfolio that I will also give away today. So let's connect. Standing invitation as well. You'd be amazed how many of you won't take me up on this. If you want to talk to me personally, if after my presentation and you want to connect with me, you want to have a personal conversation with me and talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about, I extend that invitation to you right now. So you can connect with me through social media, and I'd be happy to take some time with you. So as Mark had talked about, I've been working in the financial services industry since 2003. I started as an agent. I moved into a management role. I got promoted to vice president, and in 2013, I was promoted to president and CEO of Mass Mutual Intermountain West. We have offices all throughout the state of Utah. We have 65 financial advisors that work for us full-time, and we manage $1.3 billion in wealth. And so that's about as far as I'm going to go into Mass Mutual. Okay? I actually want to talk to you about something else that is very near and dear to my heart. And I'm going to start with a phrase, or I'm going to start with a belief that I have. And that belief is that I believe we are all temporary stewards of the resources that have been entrusted in us. And that someday we will all be held accountable for what we did with those resources. Those resources could be considered our time, that could be considered money or financial resources, that could be considered talents that you have been given, that you utilized for the betterment of those that are sitting next to you, the betterment in the state of Utah, and the betterment in the world. And I'm going to share with you a story that is very, very special to me in how I believe that I've been able to witness an absolute miracle in my life. So here's a promise that I'm going to make to you. if you allow yourself to get caught up in a cause that is greater than yourself, you will witness miracles. I promise that. If you allow yourself to get caught up in a cause that is greater than yourself, you will witness miracles. In fact, that's going to be our hashtag today. Hashtag UVU cause. Use that for all of your social media interaction. So this is how my story starts. I got lucky and talked a wonderful, wonderful person into marrying me back in 2002. This is my wife, Andrea. We were both students at Utah State University. She said yes when I proposed to her, and the rest is history, right? We were blessed with a little girl shortly after we were married, about 2 or 3 years after we were married. She's a sweetheart. And then we found out that we were expecting another child, and that this little child was going to be my son, my first son. Now, those of you who are parents know that your daughters, they have your hearts, right? But to have a son, there's unique, special feelings that come with that as far as the expectations that you have for those kids. In Preston, it was a requirement for everybody to play sports, or otherwise we wouldn't have a team. So I had aspirations of what this little guy was going to look like in regard to football and baseball and basketball and golf and everything else. I just couldn't wait. In fact, the day finally came for us to be able to have our little guy. And it started just like what you would expect in the movies, okay? So it was a hot July night. My wife woke me up at about 2 in the morning, and she said, "I think it's time." Those famous words, right? I think it's time. And so I jumped up, and I'm immediately into Superman mode. I'm like, all right, let's get you to the hospital. Let's bring this little guy into the world. And she's like, you know what? Like, just take a minute. It's going to be a long day. Maybe get ready, and then we'll go. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to jump in the shower. And I jump in the shower, and I come out to find my wife on the bed in complete, full-blown labor. Like, we waited too long. And she said the words that you don't want to hear in that situation, and that is, I think we waited too long, right? And so I immediately jump into Boy Scout mode. I mean, I'm from Preston, Idaho. I know how to handle these things. And I run into the garage, and I grab my Leatherman and my headlamp, and I get ready to deliver this kid, right? Exactly what you guys would do. And so I run back in there, and fortunately enough, it was just a, what do they call contractions, right? That just had passed, right? And so I finally get her to the hospital. And before I know it, there's my son. And he was perfect. And I'm doing everything that a dad does and taking pictures and just envisioning what this is going to look like for me and my son as we grow up into the world. But I could notice that the nurses and the doctor were kind of quiet, right? They were kind of quiet. In fact, they were whispering back and forth, and that caused alarm for me. And so I'm just kind of watching this, and after about 10 minutes, the doctor came over and he put his arm around me, and I'll never forget what he said. He said in a very quiet voice, he said, "Brady, we believe that your son has Down syndrome." Okay, so here's a picture of Nash after he was born. And I was completely floored. I was not ready for this. I didn't know what to think. All of those aspirations and thoughts and goals that I had for me and my son, I was asking myself, is that going to change? Is that different? I didn't know what the future held for me. And then I got really, really scared because I knew that I had to go and tell my wife what the doctor just told to me, right? And so I took a few minutes, I composed myself, I mustered up the courage, and I went over, scared to death, and leaned down to Andrea. And I said, "Andrea, the doctor told us that Nash has Down syndrome." And she didn't skip a beat. It didn't change anything for her at all, nothing. She was just as happy and just as excited as she was before we had Nash. And I knew from that moment that everything was going to be okay. And so I spent some time with my little guy, and after a few days, not only was everything going to be okay, but I could feel something different about this kid. In fact, I could tell and feel that this kid was going to inspire me, and he was going to inspire a lot of other people. Fast forward now, here's a few pictures of Nash. Nash is my best buddy. He is 8 years old, he's 9 now. He just turned 9 a couple months ago. Having a hard time keeping up with Nash. but he loves school. He loves fishing with dad. He loves going and watching his little brother's football games. He loves anything that has to do with everybody. And he is just an absolute little stud. And he motivates me to want to be a better person. In fact, because of Nash, we've got involved in a lot of different community events. One in particular was through the Down Syndrome Society, the Down Syndrome Association. We love to be able to be around as many people with Down syndrome as possible. They're just fun, right? Well, it was through this association that I came across something that also changed my life forever. I learned that it's common practice in many cultures that when a child is born with a special need, that they're immediately placed into an orphanage. And that's where they stay for the first 4 to 5 years of their life. And then after that, they go to a mental institution with adults. So imagine that. 5-year-old boy, 5-year-old little girl with Down syndrome being shipped off to a mental institution. These are the pictures that I saw. And when I saw those pictures, I knew that I had to do something to help these kids. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I had to do something. So I started to research it out. And I found something that gave us hope. I found that there are multiple families that are ready and willing to adopt these kids. The only thing that they lack is the funding to be able to pay for the adoption. In fact, I saw pictures like this. That's that little girl after she was adopted. I found out that it was about $30,000 to $40,000 on average to adopt a child internationally. And I said, all right, if money's the only thing standing in the way of these kids getting adopted, let's go to work and let's find a way to take this home for these kids. Remember what I said at the very first? Every one of us will be held accountable to the resources that we have temporarily been entrusted with. That we'll be held accountable in how we did or what we did with those resources to help other people. So what we did, the very first thing that we did is we chose a little guy. We were like, all right, we're going to raise money for an orphan. We chose Eli. Eli was tucked away in an orphanage in Lithuania. Eli was 4 years old, and we talked to the orphanage directors, and in 4 years, nobody had ever inquired about adopting Eli, ever. He'd been there since he was a baby. It was during Christmas time, and I witnessed my first miracle. We spread the word on what we were trying to accomplish. We told our parents, don't buy us gifts, donate the money to Eli, thinking that we'd get $100, $200, maybe $300. In 2 weeks, $20,000 was raised. Out of the woodwork, money was coming in. Miracles that I just couldn't even fathom. Then the bigger miracle took place. Within 30 days of us raising $20,000, this little boy that hadn't had a family inquire about him in 4 years had a family commit to him and adopt him. This is a picture of Eli now. I've held this little guy in my arms, and I've seen firsthand what allowing yourself to get caught up in a cause that is bigger than yourself will do. Okay? So this was kind of addicting, right, for me and Andrea, and we're like, all right, if this worked for Eli, let's think of other ways to be able to help other kids. And she goes, I've got an idea. And she said, you've always wanted to do an Ironman triathlon. Why don't you do an Ironman triathlon for one of these kids? I'm like, oh, why don't you do an Ironman triathlon for one of these kids? So this is my background with triathlons prior to this. I had done those small triathlons, you know, the ones where you slide down the pool or the slide into the pool, then you ride your little bike around the block, and then you kind of run through some cones and stuff. But I had never done an Ironman triathlon. And so this is what an Ironman triathlon consists of. You do a 2.4 mile swim, a 112 mile bike, and then you finish it off by running a marathon. Okay? And the thought of doing that was crazy, right? So I got to confess, I did want to become an Ironman prior to this idea with helping these kids. And I'd actually tried and I'd trained and I had thought maybe someday I can actually do this. And the reason why I wanted to do it, I'm embarrassed to say this, was simply because I wanted to say that I was an Ironman. I wanted to have the t-shirt that said I was an Ironman. I wanted to put the sticker in the back of my truck that said I was an Ironman. And I just wanted to kick that off my bucket list, right? What was the motivation though? It was about me, okay? So I decided if I'm gonna do a full Ironman, so this is again prior to the helping a child, if I'm gonna do a full Ironman, I'm gonna try a half Ironman first. You wanna see what happened? Here you go. That is me after completing a half Ironman. It almost killed me. Literally, like, take you to the hospital and plug an IV and you're going to die type of kill you, okay? When I was done with this race, I hung up my running shoes and said, yeah, that's great. The whole idea of doing an Ironman, the 112, the marathon, yeah, that's great, but that's not for me. It's not possible. My knees are broken. I'm done, right? So 2 years later, when my wife said, why don't you do an Ironman for one of these kids? That was a big challenge. But I thought about it. And I said, you know what? If me doing an Ironman means that one of these kids gets to come home, I'll do it. And so I started to train. And this is what the training looked like. On a weekly basis, I had to swim 10,000 yards. Cameron might remember some of this because he was around when I was doing this crazy stuff. I had to bike 200 miles, and then I would typically run about 40 miles. Most of this training was done in the very early mornings because I still had a full-time job. We still had 3 kids, and I had to take care of all of that, as you can see. So that picture up there of me riding a bike, a lot of times on our big rides, we would leave between 3:30 and 4 in the morning, do most of the ride in the pitch dark so that we could get home in time for kids' ball games and everything else. So I'm out doing this, right? And I actually started to see some traction take place. I started to get in better shape, but most importantly, I saw that the media and other people were starting to catch on to what we were doing. In fact, some of the local news stations in Utah, some of the local stations up in Idaho as well, were covering this story, and we were starting to make some traction. And then another miracle took place. I got a phone call one day. In fact, let me even back up just a little bit. You see, there's a lot of Ironmans all throughout the world. Okay, there was one in St. George that I was eyeing. I was considering one in California. But has anybody ever heard of the Kona Ironman? So all of these other Ironmans anybody can sign up for. But the Kona Ironman, the original Ironman on the big island of Kona, is the original Ironman. And that's where the Ironman World Championship is held. And you can't get into this thing. It's an elite athlete. You have to 100% be almost a pro triathlete to be able to get into this thing. And every year they do an NBC broadcast about some of these featured athletes. It's pretty incredible. Well, it's in July. I'm training for an Ironman. I wasn't sure which one I was going to do, and I get a phone call. And an individual that says, Brady, you don't know me, but I know about your story. We have a lot in common. You see, I'm an Ironman, and I also have a son who has Down syndrome. And I happen to be the CEO of the company that is the presenting sponsor of this year's Ironman World Championship. In fact, we would like to invite you and your family to come to Kona, and we want you to race in the Ironman World Championship, and we're going to feature your story on the NBC broadcast to the world. Talk about a miracle. How could I have planned that going into this? You can't. But as I said, if you allow yourself to get caught up in a cause that is greater than yourself, you will witness miracles. And so I prepared for the Ironman World Championship, and the day finally came. You see me there? I'm there, somewhere in the middle. It was wild. It was absolutely wild. The swim was intense. Imagine being in just a washing machine with 1,900 other people that you're just beating on each other. And you do that for 2.4 miles. You get out and get on a bike, of which you ride for 112 miles through the lava fields of Kona. The wind is intense. like knock you off your bike intense. The hills, there's some steep inclines. It is hot as can be. In fact, I'm going to share a really funny story that happened on this. So don't tell everybody this, all right? This is a special little group right here. But when you're on that bike, you're on the bike for about 5 hours, 5 to 6 hours, okay? And you're drinking a ton of water, which you got to go to the bathroom, like a lot, right? But you're in a race. You don't just stop to go to the bathroom, so what do? You just go on your bike, okay? So the best time and the best place to do this is when you're going downhill so you don't have to pedal. So there's a place that we turn around and we start going down this hill, and I'm not even thinking about it, and I come up behind this athlete because I'm going pretty fast, and guess what they decide it's the right time to do? And that's to go to the bathroom, right in my face. So I did what any Ironman would do. I got in front of that athlete, and then I went to the bathroom. True story, okay? So you finish the bike. I remember getting off the bike, and I remember trying to walk, and it was like, I can't even walk. How am I going to run? And then I remembered why I was doing this, and I started to run. And the hardest time of that whole race was actually the first 5 miles on that run. It was crazy. You get out, you go back into the lava fields, and you go into this area called the Energy Lab, which looked like a morgue. Literally, there were people laying on the side of the road, athletes with IVs in them that were just out. And you kind of step over their bodies and do your thing. And you keep going, and you keep going, and then in the end, you see the finish line, and you start to hear the crowd at the end, and you start to get adrenaline, and all of a sudden those legs that are killing you feel pretty good, and your pace starts to get faster. And then you cross the finish line, and you hear those famous words. And they said, "Brady Murray, you are an Ironman." And I remember finishing the sentence and saying, "Brady Murray, you are an Ironman for orphans who have Down syndrome." And in 10 hours and 51 minutes, I got it done. This next piece is the video. We haven't tried the sound. Hopefully the sound is the right place. But this is the video that was shared on the NBC broadcast. So here you go. So this video was broadcast throughout the world multiple times for a period of about 6 months. And especially in the beginning, I had people from all over the world contacting me and saying, "We do Ironmans, we run marathons, we swim, we bike, we want to be a part of this organization. We want to be part of this cause." And I thought to myself, organization? There goes the entrepreneurial mind in me, right? Why don't we start a nonprofit? And so together with my wife, we created Racing for Orphans with Down Syndrome, and started to be able to have these athletes race for the cause of helping orphaned kids find a loving home. So if you remember, money's the only thing standing in the way, and that's what these athletes were starting to raise along with awareness. Fast forward now, we have 224 athletes throughout the world that race for Rods Racing. We just surpassed the $600,000 mark in funds that we have raised since 2012. Most importantly, we've found homes for 21 orphaned children. So if you remember, back to the promise that I made you, if you allow yourself to get caught up in a cause that is greater than yourself, you will witness miracles. So, another miracle. As we've been over the last, we had 4 kids, and 3 boys and a girl. Nash was just the light of our life, and we'd laugh at him every night at dinner table. Our other kids love him very much. We've helped a lot of kids to be able to be adopted, and everybody always asked us, "So why aren't you guys adopting a kid?" And it was always the same answer. We've got one of those kids already. We don't need another kid that has Down syndrome. And we never thought about it, ever. Like, it just really wasn't something that we considered. But what I found is when you put yourself out there and when you are willing to push yourself to do hard things. And if your heart is open, then you will have hard things thrown upon you. You'll have opportunities to be able to help other people, right? And so last year, in 2015, I remember in the spring, my wife came to me and she said, you know, have you ever thought about adopting? I'm like, yeah, I have. In fact, we've talked about this before. And we've considered adoption over the years. In fact, we talked about it even before we were married. And so we started to kick around that idea of, you know what, maybe we'll adopt. But the idea of adopting a little boy who has Down syndrome or a little girl just wasn't in the cards, right? I mean, they're fun, but they're a lot of work at the same time. And so we took a step of faith and we started the process and looking to add to our family in adopting. And as we did this, it became very apparent that we should probably adopt a little boy who has Down syndrome. And so we followed those promptings that came, and we continued to step forward in faith, and we narrowed it down that we wanted to adopt in China. And this was a super exciting time for our family. We included all of the kids in this decision, and they were super excited that we're going to adopt a little boy, and this little boy is going to have Down syndrome, and we're all excited. Well, what happened next I wasn't prepared for, and I still struggle with it tremendously. You see, we felt like we were doing a tremendous amount of good for a child, right? And in fact, we were, and we are right now. When we narrowed it down to China, we looked at all of the kids. We pulled a list of all the kids that were aged 4 to 5 or 3 to 4 that were in China that had Down syndrome. And a list came up of 23 children that were eligible, that met our criteria of a kid who we could adopt. And this is where the hard part was. We had to tell 22 children that they were so close to getting adopted, but that they didn't quite make it. I wasn't ready for that. But I'll tell you, that experience made it so that this, Rod's Racing, this is never going to die, because we will continue to fight for these kids, and we will find every single one of those kids a home, or I'll die trying. So let's talk about the little guy that we did choose. There he was. He had some long Chinese name I couldn't pronounce, so we just call him Cooper. Cooper was 4 years old, and we pulled his file, and I started to read about Cooper, and they said that Cooper was very energetic, he's an outgoing kid, he's a life-of-the-party type of kid. And then I read a little further, and I read that he was abandoned. They found him outside of a factory, a really industrial type area, when they guesstimate about 6 months old. So imagine that. This little guy was on the curb as a 6-month-old, having been abandoned. We knew he deserved a family, so we went to work. It took us about a year to get approved and to get everything taken care of, but before no time, in April of this year, Cooper was our own. This picture here, you can see Cooper next to his mom on his mom's lap. That picture was taken literally probably 3 minutes after we met Cooper. And the expression on Cooper's face has not changed. He is an incredible little boy. It took him a little while to give me that expression, but go figure, right? 6'1" white guy. He's never seen that kid before, right? While we were in China, we felt very strongly that we needed to go to the exact place where Cooper was found. And that's the exact place where Cooper was found. It was serendipitous for me. And at first, I had anger, right? Like, what mother could ever just abandon their child? But after visiting that place and really trying to put myself in the shoes of Cooper's birth mom, I felt peace. And I genuinely believe that she was led. She was inspired to do so, knowing that this was the right thing for her son. and that come full circle 4 years later, sure enough, it was the right thing for our son. So think about our other kids. How are they going to react? Well, this is how they looked the night we got home, and it hasn't changed since. They love Cooper. He is just what his file said, life of the party, always happy, always ready to have fun and do whatever it is that kids like to do. In fact, he adds a little bit of drama to our family. We're a pretty low-key family, right? And Cooper is more of a drama king, and this is an example of that. I think this epitomizes pretty well our kids, low-key except for Cooper. Life of the party, Cooper. So what about me and Andrea? We continue to race. In fact, we have a big race on Saturday that this entire year we decided one of the ways that we're going to eliminate some of the stress with adopting is we were going to try and qualify for the Boston Marathon together. And I don't know where that idea came from because it's a pretty stressful endeavor. In fact, this Saturday we are going to Huntsville and we're going to try and qualify together for the Boston Marathon. And I can promise you guys that it has a whole different feel to it when you're trying to qualify or do well in these races, when you're thinking about those kids that you're racing for versus if you're doing it for yourself. It's a pretty fun thing to be a part of. One of my favorite pictures of Nash of all time, this is a picture that was taken over in Kona, and we look and say, well, what next? What are we looking at into the future? I don't know. I don't know. But I do know that I am willing and ready to take any resource that was entrusted in me and use that to be able to better the lives of other people. Because I know that someday I will be held accountable to how I used those resources. On a side note, I want to actually end just with giving some insights as to your chosen career and your chosen profession. I've been working in financial planning now since 2003. This career is one of the reasons that I was able to get involved with rods, because it affords you incredible flexibility. It affords you an incredible ability to earn a well above average income, and it allows you to be an entrepreneur. How hard you work, how smart you work, how creative you are with how you spend your time will immediately affect how you succeed as a financial planner and as an entrepreneur. And I promise you, if you take that even one step further and do so with a heart that is pure, with the idea of helping others, you too will witness miracles. I appreciate you guys letting me come by. I don't know if we want to do a little Q&A. Yeah. Yeah. Shelly's going to choose which one of you guys get the golf balls.
Wasn't that great? I mean, isn't this a cool class? All right, I get some exercise. Triathlon.
So, someone in your position, working with the people you work with, students who we are, who are supposed to have business ideas, do your clients ever invest in companies to be, or do you guys just invest in the stock market and companies that are?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so in essence, the question was, do we as financial advisors align our clients who have investable assets with individuals that have ideas? And the answer to that is we as CFPs do not. That would be more on the venture capitalist side. So good question.
Okay, coming over. Woo.
Make it happen. This is good.
This is so we can hear it on the camera too.
In my experience of doing causes like helping the homeless or something, it seems like unless it's affected you personally, like your story where you had a son that was autistic, it's Down syndrome, sorry.
All good.
How do you get people to get involved in those type of things that don't have a personal connection to that?
That's a great question. The reality is we aren't looking to sign up the whole world to race for rods. We're looking for those individuals that have that personal connection. And so if you in your life right now are like, man, I really don't have a cause that I can get caught up in, I promise you, if you seek that out, if that's your genuine desire that you want to get caught up in a cause and you start to seek that out, you will find it. It's the law of desire. That which you desire most, you always get. If you want it, it will happen.
The others.
Can you talk about the logistical side of developing this nonprofit and how you really got it to be?
Yeah, great question. This is, you'll find with me, I'm very open. It was hard, like hard. I'm talking like hard work, not fun work. Like it wasn't just all sunshine and rainbows, right? You know, it was difficult. In fact, most of the time, or the time that I had to be able to do this was on weekends and evenings. And so primarily weekends, primarily Sunday afternoon, to be honest. And so I would spend 4 to 5 hours every Sunday and then just piece it together during the week to try and get the logistics behind it. And so my first word of advice is if you want to start a nonprofit or you have a cause that you want to help in, the first thing you should do is go and seek out other nonprofits that are already started and align yourself with them, okay? And once you do that, you're going to gain a lot of perspective, and then you can take it to another level if you want to create your own. So I did it the hard way. I started from scratch, and it was just a lot of heavy lifting, tons of heavy lifting. All right, last thing that I'm going to say, our firm, so Mass Mutual, every year we'll hire 8 to 10 students nationwide, typically one. I don't think we've hired 2, but I know we have hired 1 from Utah Valley University in the past. If you are an entrepreneur, okay, so I'm not saying if you're a financial planning student, that's good, but if you are an entrepreneur and you genuinely want to get caught up in a career that allows you to have experiences similar to what I have had with your clientele, you should talk to me, okay? No promises. Our ratio is typically 16 first interviews before we extend an offer. And so we'll do 16 first interviews to find one that is a good candidate. But I'm telling you, if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, you should look into this career and I'd be happy to talk to you. Remember, any of you that want to talk to me personally, one-on-one, you have my stuff. If you reach out to me, I promise you I will give you time one-on-one. Thanks, guys.